Story 1. Range of motion in your musculoskeletal system. When muscles sit in one position for hours on end, day after day, they stay in that position. Then you say, "My neck is tight or sore." Story 2. Here is the worst example. In the military, and I assume in a lot of other government entities, if you do not spend your allotted budget for the year, the belief is that your department does not need that much money next year. To prevent this from happening, departments will buy fancy printers, laptops, and more at the end of the fiscal year to maintain their budget. Edit. Apparently, this happens in many lines of work. That is discouraging. Story 3. Fitness for sure. My mom is a physical therapist. She used to have patients in their 70s who could still move like a 20-something because they had been exercising their whole lives. These people could still run marathons. Most 70-year-olds can't even run a mile anymore. Story 4. Very specific, but any kind of motor function after a stroke. I had a catastrophic stroke in 2017. It took me 17 months, 7 months in a wheelchair, 5 months with a walker, and 5 months with a cane, of working at it, but now I can walk around with no problem. It's not normal, but I can get wherever I need to unassisted. I met an old man who had a stroke when he was younger. He was practicing using a walker for a bit, but he told his doctor the wheelchair was much easier for him. The doctor said, "Just use the wheelchair." This was in the 1980s, and not much was known about neuroplasticity. He's been in the wheelchair since and has no chance of walking now. His brain isn't trying to form new connections anymore. Neuroplasticity is absolutely incredible. I had heard of it before my stroke, but it's more impactful than I could have imagined. Here is a video my wife made of the first year of recovery if anyone is interested. Story 5. Consistent exercise. In an order picker in a warehouse. On an average day, I take 36,000 to 40,000 steps. The week before Christmas, we started inventory, and I was on the cherry picker all week. Then, 3 days off each for Christmas and New Year. I was off all of Christmas week because I was sick. So, almost 3 full weeks of not moving like I usually do. I was super sore when we got back to it. Story 6. Stamina and strength in the elderly. Aging at the end of life includes naturally growing weaker every day. Seniors who do not pay attention to this soon become couch potatoes, unable to walk any real distance, climb stairs, or get up off the floor or ground when they fall. It is literally incapacitating. Once that strength and stamina are gone, it is extremely difficult to recover. Efforts to do so are often wrought with lots of pain and very small gains, so much so that the effort quickly becomes too daunting for many. The gains that do accumulate will quickly evaporate as soon as the efforts to keep exercising cease. It is all tied directly to the relationship between moving and staying alive and functional, and not moving, which accelerates the rate of dying. Death comes when we finally slow down so much that we stop moving altogether. Move it or lose it for seniors is literally about staying alive or not. Story 7. I played trombone for a long time and stopped. I tried again after 10 years and I could not. My embouchure had atrophied to the point where I couldn't. Story 8. I used to draw very well, mainly portraits, and then I stopped because of university and then corporate America. I cannot do it anymore. It's like I never had this skill. The worst part is my eyesight has gotten significantly worse, and I cannot see details without glasses. Story 9. Rather specialized here, but I have arthritis and avoided walking a lot due to the pain. As a result, I ended up gaining a lot of weight, which made walking even harder, and my joints getting progressively worse. With arthritis, you need to keep using those joints or it gets worse. I'm in a wheelchair and barely able to get to the toilet and can only blame myself. Story 10. I got so out of practice engaging in small talk or more deep communication because of the isolation from the pandemic that I decided to go back to Toastmasters. Now I am leading our club and have to open and close every meeting. I am a lot more comfortable, but I continue to struggle at opening with a casual shtick. I hope to be better at that eventually anyway. I used to be so much better at it. Story 11. The Slav squat is the classic example. Kids can do it. People who have squat toilets or squat every day can do it. Grown Americans, and really most people who have seated toilets and easy access to chairs everywhere, usually can't. When I do barbell squats, I have to have something under my heels just because I'm so inflexible. Another example is getting up after falling for the elderly. Falling for many elderly is really bad because they just can't get up afterward in Western countries. In countries where they sleep on mats on the floor, this is not really a problem unless a bone was broken or something. Story 12. I learned how to play the piano as a kid and continued it well into my 20s. Then I didn't have the opportunity for a long time. When I finally sat back down at one, I realized my fingers didn't want to cooperate and made basic mistakes even on a simple tune. Story 13. There's a type of ice cream snack that's caused a lot of upset here recently because they're going to stop selling it. And every person who is outraged at the loss of this national treasure, I buy one about once a year or every 3 months. People do not like change or reminders that they are getting older, but this happens all the time with chocolate bars in high street shops. People miss them when they go but never cared enough to keep them viable. Story 14. I met an old boy at the gym who said he's 75 and wants to be flexible enough to still be able to cut his toenails when he's 90. Made me think, move it and use it or lose it. Story 15. When I was a kid, my American family moved to Italy. My parents wanted a little translator, so they decided to put me into Italian public school from the time I was 8 until I was 11. The process of learning a new language well enough to go to school and make friends was very difficult, but by the end of my first year, I was a fluent speaker. By the end of my third year, I was as close to a native speaker as I could get. Then we moved back to the United States, and I didn't get to speak Italian anymore. Literally, over the course of a week, I went from doing 90% of my communication in Italian to none. None of my family had bothered to learn because I had always been able to translate for them. So once school let out for the summer and we moved back to the United States, I just stopped speaking it. Now, 26 years later, I couldn't string together a sentence. Story 16. Paid time off, also known as paid time off. I work in a position where time off accumulates slowly over the course of a year and expires at the end of the year. The company cannot figure out why everyone tries to take time off in December. Story 17. Among transgender women, this is common advice given regarding the downstairs parts. The effects of feminizing hormone replacement therapy cause muscle atrophy throughout the entire body, but it hits those areas particularly hard. This wouldn't be an issue for most transgender women, since many of us don't like using those parts, except if you want bottom surgery, you kind of have to, because if you let those parts atrophy too much, there won't be as much material to be used for most vaginoplasties. So, many transgender women who experience bottom dysphoria, which is not all transgender women, often have to push through their dysphoria and, more or less, exercise their parts down there like you would any other muscle, whether they want to or not, because it's literally use it or lose it. Story 18. Your muscles reciprocate and support your skeleton and joints. I realize everyone is busy, and popular advice says if you simply go for walks or clean your place, that it's enough exercise, but it isn't. If your core isn't maintained, then your healthcare professionals will cut you up and fuse things together that nature never designed you for. Story 19. Foreign languages are a big challenge. I haven't lost fluency too much, but I have lost some vocabulary and grammar structures. It really is unfortunate, but if you're not in a community where people speak the language or have difficulty keeping up with friends, you'll lose it a bit. It's not that difficult to relearn, though. Comes back quickly with practice. As far as instruments go, however, I have a lot of trouble going back. Story 20. Playing guitar and maybe other instruments. I forgot how long I haven't played, but when I tried to play my nephew's acoustic guitar, my fingers hurt so much I couldn't even play chords. The worst part is his parents always told him I was good at it. His frustration was so clear when I couldn't even remember songs like Fur Elise. Story 21. A house in California. Californians take squatting crisis into their own hands. Newsweek. Story 22. I spent the post-COVID years being mostly sedentary and not exercising at all. By the fall of 2024, my endurance and lung capacity were shot. I would get winded climbing the stairs. I had problems with my shoulders, my blood pressure was borderline high, and my mood was low. I've been working with a personal trainer for 10 weeks, and the difference is dramatic. The shoulder problem is gone, blood pressure has improved measurably, and I just feel better all around. We evolved to climb, walk, run, push, pull, and lift. Doing almost none of that and sitting around all day instead means your body eventually no longer functions as it should, and it affects more than just your ability to do a pull-up. It also affects your digestion, sleep, mood, and more. I knew all of this, but I wasn't expecting the improvements to be so obvious and rapid. Story 23: Physical fitness. Now in my mid-50s, I find that if I take a break of a week or so from exercising, I deteriorate really quickly, even if I'm just walking a couple of miles. Stay in motion, fellow Generation Zers. Story 24. The remaining money in the budget sometimes rolls over. Worse still, if you don't spend all the money, they only give you what was actually spent in the next year as the new budget. Story 25. Music skills. I'm a music teacher, and the drop-off over the summer every year for the students who don't play is somehow surprising every year. Story 26. My travel budget. My company is giving my team a travel budget each year. Every year in December, we scramble to make sure that any travel for January and February can be planned, booked, and paid before the end of the year in case we have leftover money. Story 27. Brought up in a Gaelic environment, when I went to primary school, the policy was English only, and every time I spoke Gaelic or Scots, I would get the yardstick brought down on my hand. I still have the scars. I lost the confidence to speak Gaelic, though I still can understand most of it, especially if it is written down. I should explain I went to primary school 50 years ago, and Scottish schools now have a more enlightened attitude. Story 28. Credit cards. A lot of them have policies to review your credit limit and even close your account if you don't use it. Check your terms and conditions and your bank inboxes. People. Story 29. Instrumental ability. A more specific example. Brass instruments, especially trumpet. I know if you don't play, say, piano for a long time, you'll likely lose the coordination in your arms and hands. Guitarists lose their calluses. But man, trumpet is tough in this regard. I got sick a few months back and didn't play for over a week. A short amount of time. I sounded awful the day I put the horn back to my lips, and the mouthpiece felt foreign. Just a week. Took me a while to get back to where I was. Trumpet uses the small and delicate muscles in your face that atrophy quickly while not used. At the same time, too much practice and playing while your chops are tired is bad and can lead to injury. So they also need rest, just like with any muscle. There are some days where taking the day off is beneficial and has helped me, usually when I've been having a week of heavy playing. But for the most part, you have to practice trumpet daily. That's why I tell people, usually those I've noticed who just play piano, guitar, bass, who want to take up trumpet as a side instrument, that it really doesn't work as a casual instrument you can pick up and play once in a while. It needs daily maintenance practice. Not to mention it isn't an instrument that provides instant gratification as a beginner. Story 30. Your brain. Aside from the people who never wanted to use it in the first place, I know so many people who were actually relatively smart growing up and studied hard, but completely stopped learning anything after school, and it's noticeable. Story 31. I was surprised to find when I was an adult to discover how wobbly I was on a bicycle. I never imagined that my sense of balance was something that could disappear. Story 32. I am a physiotherapist, and usually I would say movement, but that feels too broad for this, so I will narrow it down to just stairs. If you value being able to walk up and down stairs when you are older, do not get a bungalow. Story 33. Being able to use a controller. I used to play high-level competitive gaming and shooters. Then I switched to a personal computer and got to about that same level of skill on a personal computer. Now I can't even aim a gun properly or walk correctly using a controller. Story 34. Being able to use a controller. I used to play high-level competitive gaming and shooters, and then I switched to personal computer and got to about that same level of skill on personal computer. Now I can't even aim a gun properly or walk correctly using a controller. Story 35. Your brain. My father was diagnosed with dementia last year at the age of 70, and I believe it was because after he retired, he just sat and watched television. Dementia is not in our family history. It's so tough to remember what he used to be and see what he is now. Story 36. I never used my breasts to produce milk, and so I have never lactated. It is one of my saddest regrets. I should imagine a lot of other men feel the same way too. Story 37. Languages. I lived in Germany for 2 years and was studying the language and picked it up. Not the best, but it was functional. Then I moved back to the United States. I haven't had a chance to use it, and I am finding out that I have lost most of it. It's not an easy language to learn. Turns out it's really easy to forget. Story 38. About 15 years ago, I quit playing gigs after having performed extensively for about a decade. I only did recording sessions from then on, which was very part-time as I am mostly a recording engineer. I haven't been much of a practitioner since then either, as I was burned out. For a couple of years, I could still manage pretty well. However, about 8 years ago, I really started noticing how my skills were deteriorating. It didn't bother me much at first, but the longer I went without playing, the more my skills declined. At a certain point, I realized that not only were my skills lacking, but my confidence was also greatly diminished. I could still handle playing on people's records pretty well, but it took a bit more effort to really excel. Anyway, I've started practicing again. It does come back pretty quickly, at least from the feeling of, boy, I am terrible, to, okay, this isn't bad. I doubt I'll ever get back to where I was when I was playing several times per week, unless some enthusiastic person decides to hire me for their band, which is highly unlikely.